Hello everyone and welcome to Sunup. I'm Lyndall Stout. We join you today from wheat harvest here in Grant County on the Vanneman family farm, where they've been cutting wheat now for a few weeks.
We're seeing about half the yield we normally do on a normal year.
For the most part, things have gone smoothly, but there have been a few challenges to overcome. We'll have much more on their harvest here in Grant County a little later in the show. But first, an update on canola harvest and summer crops with our Extension Cropping System Specialist, Josh Lofton.
The 18 canola crops probably about as big of a mixed bag as you can have. And we talked about it all years. There was some areas that looked okay, some areas that didn't look okay. And that's kind of what we're seeing on yield. There was some areas of canola that folks are pulling out, in between 10 and 15 bushels, and there's some areas that folks are pulling out in between 30 and 40 bushels. So it's a mixed bag. It's just spotty. If you caught rains in March and April, you did pretty good. If you didn't, that's where we saw a lot of our canola that was a lot shorter than normal and a lot less seed than normal. The interesting thing is harvest was a difficult challenge. I know a lot of folks, because of these late rains, had an issue with swathing versus direct cutting. And we saw a lot more direct cut canola this year than we have in more recent years. And at least from what I hear from folks that have, they were quite successful with it. But once again, it just kind of contributes to that mixed bag of canola that we had since probably about fall, when we were getting those spotty rainfalls. And that's kind of just been the story of the season. And why don't we just carry on the whole story of variability? And that's kind of where we're seeing some of our more challenging winter crop areas, especially in some of our areas in Woods counties and far western Oklahoma. They have some really good looking summer crops. They've caught these late April rains, early April rains, and some of the milo and the cotton and the soybean out in that part of the world looks a little bit better than their canola and their wheat did a couple of months ago. Realistically, we're in a tough spot in some areas. I pulled this sorghum plant here, and probably some growers, depending on where you are, probably have sorghum that looks very similar to this. In the heat of the day, you can start to see some of these grass crops start to roll up on the leaves, and it's really, whenever you see a whole field of it, it looks like we're growing pineapples in Oklahoma, because it looks just like a whole bunch of pineapple leaves. This is just the sorghum's natural defense mechanism for losing water. And so if growers go out at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, they should still see these leaves fully opening, trying to get a little bit of sun before the heat of the day kind of comes. With this week and this weekend's cooler temperatures and some periodic rainfall, we should start to see some of these things open up a little bit. A lot of our real early sorghum maturing hybrids are getting to be at flower, or their heads are starting to come out of the boot. Some of our really early planted soybeans are getting to reproductive stage. So if you do have water, now's the time to probably do those supplemental irrigation passes, because we are getting towards that really critical stage for our corn, our sorghum, and our soybean, especially those that got planted early.
It's been a difficult and somewhat interesting week in the markets, and Kim, let's just dive in. What's the news with wheat?
Well, if you look at the good news, it's the basis. It's 20, 25 cents above the July contract. You look over at the last 10 years, that basis in June has averaged 51 cents below that July contract price. The range of it, 2013, the basis averaged a minus 7 cents. That's the maximum. In 2010, it averaged a minus $1.13. And I think that just reflects the quality of those two different crops. You look at the board and the cash prices, with that high basis, the cash prices got above the export price level, and the demand just dried up, and so that futures contract price had to go down. You look at May 25, the July contract was at $5.65. It's now somewhere around $4.85. That's an 80-cent decline, and I believe that is what we got. Is the basis reflects the good protein test weight. I think the futures price decline reflects the export demand, and we had to get down to be competitive in the market.
So as we move towards the summer crop markets right now, let's just jump in with corn. What do you see?
Well, corn, you look at the corn reports on their condition. Corn's in excellent conditions, and I think the corn yield expectations have increased, and when that happens, you'd expect prices to go down. The corn basis for forward contracting, harvest delivery, around a -40 to a -50, depending on where you are in the state. You go back to, say, May the 25th, corn price, futures price was 4 1/4. It's 3.75. We've taken 50 cents off of it, and I think that's at higher yield expectations. So right now you can forward contract corn for about $3.30 for harvest delivery.
What's soybeans look like?
Well, soybeans got a lot going on. You know, you can blame everything on the negotiations with China. Our basis has been steady at 85 cents. So you look at that November contract, you go to June the 12th, it was $10.60. It's around 9.10 now. That's a $1.50 decline, and some of that is because of the risk uncertainty and what's going on with the United States-China negotiation. You look at the forward contract for soybeans, $8.25 right now.
Why are all the grain prices on the move like that?
Well, we can blame a lot going on the risk and the NAFTA and the China negotiations. However, I got to. If I think about that, if you're a large producer and you're dealing with the largest supplier of equipment and you're not willing to walk, how good a deal are you going to get? And it's going to cause some problems for both the dealer and for you. You may have to pay a higher price, but if you're not willing to walk, you're not going to get a good deal. So that's going in the market. Plus, that corn crop just looks really good. The wheat protein looks good, and so I think that's weighing on prices too. Supply and demand, I think that's also a major factor.
Okay, thank you much, Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet Weather Report. We have a number of new things at the Oklahoma Mesonet. Last week was Wesley's first Mesonet Weather Report segment. He'll be back next week with a new report. Mesonet has a new Yukon Mesonet site. It went operational on Monday, June 18th at 4:45 p.m. The Yukon site is in Canadian County, 2 miles north of Yukon. We want to thank Express Ranch for hosting this new site. These soybeans east of Chickasha are doing well. As they gain size, they'll soon cover the open ground between rows. To monitor crop maturity, farmers use degree-day heat units. To fully mature cotton, crops need between 2,200 and 2,600 heat units. As of June 19th, cotton planted on May 10th at Medford, Weatherford, and Altus have received 34 to 35% of the total cotton heat units they need to reach maturity. Shorter season varieties are used in the north, and longer season cotton varieties are planted in southern locations. Here's Gary with good news for next winter and spring precipitation.
Thanks, Al, and good morning, everyone. Well, as usual, we're going to start with the latest drought monitor map, so let's get straight to the map. Basically the same map that we've seen the last few weeks and even the last month or so. We do have that extreme to exceptional drought still in patches across northwestern Oklahoma, with the core of the worst drought centered around Woodward, Major, northern Custer, and northern Blaine counties. The one big difference we do have, though, would be the intensifying drought across the southeastern quarter of the state. We see down around McCurtain County and areas to the north and west of there. We do see that drought building in from the southeast. That's something we're definitely going to have to keep an eye on. Hopefully we'll see some rain in that area and stamp that out more quickly than what we did over across northwestern Oklahoma. We're going to look out a bit further this time. We're going to look all the way out to next fall and winter. We do have an El Nino watch that has been issued by the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center. Of course, an El Nino or La Nina watch is issued when conditions are favorable for the development of El Nino or La Nina conditions within the next 6 months. And again, this would be for El Nino conditions. Now, the good thing about El Nino is, again, during the cool season, so let's say about October through early April, sometime in that time frame, it does tend to bring the southern tier of the United States and sometimes Oklahoma, increased odds for wetter than normal and cooler than normal conditions, which would certainly be better than what we had the last couple of winters. So that's just a bit of good news as we look out towards next fall and winter. We definitely don't want to repeat the conditions that we had during the past winter that impacted that wheat crop and fire season so disastrously. So let's hope we get that El Nino with its impacts in here, give us a little bit more favorable conditions. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Anyone who's driven a combine has likely seen a snake or two out in the field. But it's a different story entirely when you come face to face with one when you're outside of the combine. Sunup's Curtis Hare takes us to Blaine County to learn more.
Silence mixed with brief sounds of wind gusts. Quintessential western Oklahoma. But take a wrong step out in these gypsum hills, and you may hear nature's most iconic warning. In Blaine and surrounding counties, the western diamondback rattlesnake is an abundant predator. But today, this species is the one being hunted.
We get calls almost all year long. We go out quite often.
Todd Felder is a member of the O'Keene Diamondback Club, a club established to help landowners manage rattlesnakes, and he's out on a call to help a producer with 2 snake dens on his property.
Their home is right over this hill. This is a snake den that the first time we hunted it, we found almost 20 snakes, 3 foot or bigger, most of them pushing 5 foot.
While the Diamondback Club's main objective is thinning out rattlesnakes, today's hunt is a little different. Todd and several other hunters are catching snakes as part of the 79th O'Keene rattlesnake hunt.
The O'Keene is the proud owner of the title of the oldest original rattlesnake roundup.
In the early days of settlement, Todd says folks would kill the snakes and display the carcasses in town. It became a huge draw for crowds, and it quickly turned into an event with a surprising mission.
Evolved into, well, if so many people are coming from town and this town and the other town to see these dead snakes, why don't we go catch them live, make an educational type festival out of it? We're still going to clean up these community grounds around us, do the good favor for the landowners that we're doing, but also educate the masses on the critical need for these snakes.
Rattlesnakes are still quite common, most notably the timber rattlesnake in the east and the western diamondback and the prairie rattlesnake in the western part of the state.
Extension wildlife specialist Dwayne Elmore says education is extremely important because there's a lot of paranoia when it comes to snakes, both venomous and non-venomous.
It's very rare for someone to get bit by any venomous snake. Almost all the bites you hear about are when someone was trying to kill the snake, trying to handle the snake. If you happen to get bit, most of the things you hear about to do are wrong. You don't want to cut the wound. You don't want to try to suck out the venom. Elevate the wound above your heart and quickly, within an hour or two, get to a hospital. We actually can legally harvest rattlesnakes if you have the appropriate license in Oklahoma. If you have a rattlesnake that you've killed for consumption or for the hide, be really careful with that snake. Even if it's dead, it can still potentially bite you. A lot of snakes that are non-venomous are confused with venomous snakes, but what you want to look for is whether or not it's a pit viper. And there are a couple of snakes that sometimes will flatten their head and appear to be a pit viper. The one that's probably most commonly confused with venomous snakes are the hognose snakes.
Although they may give you the creeps, both non-venomous and venomous snakes serve a purpose, and it's best to just leave them alone, or call an experienced snake handler like Todd to remove them from your property.
These are very beneficial animals. They control rodents just like non-venomous snakes do.
There's such a benefit or they wouldn't be here. We want the kids safe, we want you all safe, we want the dogs and cats and the cattle, all the livestock safe. And then they're going to have their place anyway.
Thousands of spectators will flow through the festival over the weekend, and you can bet Todd will be there, ready to educate them. In Blaine County, I'm Curtis Hare.
An important secondary nutrient for agricultural production is sulfur. We don't speak much about sulfur in Oklahoma because commonly we don't see that many deficiencies. But as production increases, we're seeing an increased demand in sulfur, and something we should think a little bit more about. Sulfur, a secondary nutrient, used by all of our crops. It is very important in photosynthesis and chlorophyll production, and also the activation of enzymes. Sulfur deficiencies will typically show up as a general yellowing in new growth in fields. So if you go across the field, whether it's wheat or corn, the tips of the new leaves will start to be a little bit lighter green. Why are we seeing more sulfur deficiencies? One, sulfur is a yield-driven component. How much sulfur we need is driven by yield. Over the years, we have an increased yield across all of our crops, so we're having an increased need for sulfur in our soils. Now, one thing we keep in mind, sulfur is in low need, total need, as compared to nitrogen. So for wheat, for every 20 pounds of nitrogen that we would apply, now 20 pounds would be every 10 bushel, 10 BPA, we're going to need 1 pound of sulfur. That is OSU's rec. So 20 pounds of N, for every 20 pounds of N, we need 1 pound of sulfate sulfur. So 1 pound of sulfur. Canola and oilseed requires a significant amount of more sulfur. So with sulfur, for every 10 pounds of nitrogen that we apply 1 pound of sulfur. Our average yield is a 40 bushel wheat crop, 40 BPA, 40 bushels of wheat per acre. That demands about 80 pounds of nitrogen to get to us this 40 bushel mark. So we would be applying 80 pounds of N to reach our 40 bushel yield goal. For that 80 pounds of N, we're only going to need about 4 pounds of sulfur. So 4 pounds of sulfur is for a 40 bushel crop. Keep in mind, we're still annually getting 3 to 4 pounds of sulfur as rainfall. When you're wanting to worry about sulfur applications, I recommend a deep soil sample. Sulfur is a mobile nutrient. Sulfate is negative, so it's going to flow like nitrate through the soil. So we want a 0 to 18-inch sample and look for sulfur and base it upon a yield goal recommendation, which can be found in the Soil Fertility Handbook. For more information about sulfur, check out the Sunup website at www.sunup.okstate.edu.
We've reached the midpoint of the year, so it's time we take a look back on how cattle markets have been doing so far. And Daryl, so how would you characterize the cattle and beef markets?
Well, I think 2018 has been kind of a so far so good year. 2017, we had bigger supplies, but we also had exceptional demand that made the year surprisingly good. I think to some extent that's carried over into 2018, not quite as pronounced. Supply is continuing to increase, but demand has been pretty good up to this point in time.
So what are some supply challenges that the industry faces?
Well, again, slaughter is still going up. That happened last year, so we're going to slaughter more cattle this year. Slaughter, will be up around 4%, 3.5% to 4%. But the difference from last year to this year is that carcass weights, which went down in 2017, are also up relative to that lower level in 2018. So we've got both increased slaughter and increased carcass weights adding to our total beef production.
And what about demand? Demand's still up, isn't it?
It's been pretty good. Domestic demand has held pretty well. Wholesale beef values have held pretty well. We've seen a little more pressure recently. We're kind of at the, a big supply time period. We had cattle a little bit stacked up in this May-June period. And so demand's been pretty good. And of course, export demand has been exceptional up to this point, but we do have some challenges going forward.
Yeah, well, like you said, going forward, what are some other major factors that are going to impact the beef and cattle markets for the rest of the year?
Well, there's a number of factors to watch here. I guess first and foremost right now, obviously, we've got a lot of attention on this trade and tariff situation, what's going to happen with global markets. There's a number of ways that could impact beef markets, both directly and indirectly. So that'll be a major factor. We're going to continue to watch these supply conditions, carcass weights in particular. We have some marginal drought conditions that could get worse and add to some of those challenges, so we have to watch that a little bit. And then we're going to just be watching domestic demand continuing as we go forward. Again, we're going to have lots of supply, so we do need that demand to hold things together.
And you mentioned the global market. I mean, you just got back from a month-long trip in China. Tell us a little bit about what you experienced over there.
Well, the trip to China was almost a month long, and it was really sort of broken into two parts. We had several objectives. The first half, I was teaching a class at China Agricultural University in Beijing as a part of our joint program with that university in agribusiness. Then after that, I had the opportunity to travel for another couple of weeks and really get to see part of the country, see the agriculture, and really start to develop a little bit of knowledge about China and the potential that we have there.
So how does Chinese agriculture compare to the agriculture that we're used to here?
Well, we traveled a lot around the country and traveled by train, and so you get to see a lot. Of course, China is a big agricultural producer in total. It's a big country. Most of the agriculture is relatively small scale. There is some, technology or mechanization, if you will, but it's relatively small scale kinds of stuff. Still fairly labor intensive. You've got lots of diversity in crop and livestock production, and of course, lots of fruits and vegetables and other kinds of production.
All right, Daryl, thanks a lot. Daryl Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist at Oklahoma State University.
As we begin to reach the real hot days of an Oklahoma summer, it's important for cow-calf producers to remember that perhaps the most important nutrient that cattle need is water. How much water do we have to make sure that we have available for a cow-calf herd here in an Oklahoma summer? Well, there is data available, and some of the most usable information that I could find about water requirements for beef cattle come from the University of Georgia. And they basically put it in some pretty simple terms, that at 90 degrees in the summertime, they have found that the requirements for a lactating beef cow is about 2 gallons per 100 pounds of body weight. Okay, let's refigure that. If we're have a 1,200 pound beef cow, a spring calver that's nursing a calf, then she herself needs 24 gallons of water every day. The non-lactating animals in the herd, the dry cows, the bulls, replacement heifers, the calves, would require an average of about 1 gallon per 100 pounds of body weight. So in the case of that cow-calf pair, the 1,200 pound lactating cow and her calf, we're going to need about 24 gallons for the cow and perhaps about another 5 gallons for the calf during the hot weather in a typical summer here in the Southwest. I think we do want to keep in mind that there's quite a little bit of variation in the cows in our herd, but we want to make sure that we're at least the minimum amount for all the cows in the herd. Let's remember that some of these may weigh more than 1,200 pounds. They may be 1,400 pound cows. We may have some that are heavy lactators, giving more milk, and they in turn require more water. But I think that rule of thumb that we were using of 2 gallons per 100 pounds of body weight for the lactating cows and 1 gallon per 100 pounds of body weight for the non-lactating animals in our herd will be a good starting place to make sure that we're supplying enough water for our herd this summer. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on Sunup's Cow-Calf Corner.
Finally today, wheat harvest on the family farm in Grant County.
Right now, anything under 13.
With his son Waylon in tow, Lyndall Vanneman says this is his happy place.
That is my home. There's no place I'd rather be than in a combine. I've been that way since I was my boy's age. Since I was 3 years old, I rode in a combine with my granddad.
Lyndall knew then he'd be a farmer, first inspired by his great-grandmother. Her now centennial farm eventually became his.
That's kind of where my passion and drive for agriculture comes from, is from her. She did it for so long, and they prospered in what they did. And then along with my father-in-law and his family, I mean, they've suffered droughts for years, and they're still here and they're still going. So hopefully we'll still be going when my boys up and going. That resilient mindset, especially important in years like this. We're seeing about half the yield we normally do on a normal year. Some's been a little less and some's been a little more than that, but I'd say we're probably averaging about 30 bushel when we normally should be around 6. The plant's been so stressed out, it had drought, and then it had freeze, and then we had drought, and then we had a 4-inch monsoon right before the day we started cutting. which didn't really help anything. We've basically had everything thrown at us this year that would put us down, you know.
The growing season,
You never know what you're going to get.
like riding a roller coaster.
It keeps you on your toes.
A regular wheat canola rotation helps.
We try and do not quite 50-50. We normally have more wheat acres than we do canola. It cleans it up, it gives you more chemical rotation so you can kill rye and keeps your wheat filled, plus the yield the second year after wheat has been phenomenal for us.
Thank goodness for better prices right at harvest, not to mention technology.
As you can see, the yield's climbing just a little bit in there.
It bumped it up.
Yeah.
Lindell's used GPS in his combine the past 2 years. Every row, precision cut. A monitor reports real-time changes in yield, moisture, and other data, so he can make immediate adjustments. Waylon, who turns 4 next month, is his #1 helper.
Can we, like, it's the spins around, like.
He has been in a combine since he was born. I mean, he's had to ride in one here, he's rode in one up north. He's lived in that thing as well as I am, and most of the time he wants to be out here too. If we're combining, he's combining on the floor. I mean, he's got toys. There's combines and tractors on the back of the pickup. There's combines and tractors in the combine.
Important time together for father and son. Beginning lessons about farming and likely something much greater.
If I can farm and I can do my best at doing it, then hopefully he can learn from me, and he will do his best, and his children will do the same. And the end result, hopefully, will just be a better world that we continue on with through us and through them and through generations to come, that we can do our best at feeding the world and give it our best shot.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. From Wheat Harvest in Grant County, I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.